fellow ink drinkers, and welcome back to the Blind Girls Book Talk podcast. My name is Aria.
And I'm Belle.
And we are two legally blind sisters who love reading and love books. And so what we've done is we've created this show in order to talk about that subject. We cover a wide range of bookish content, and that can range from bad retellings of stories, book to movie adaptation comparisons, buddy reads, recent reads, author talks, book theories. Really, the list does go on and on. And today what we're doing is we're doing a bit of a cross between a author talk and a theory kind of video. And we are going to be talking about the Bronte sisters. Now, I have never read any of the Bronte sisters' works, but Belle is the one who found this theory, and she's the one who's kind of done the research on it. So she's going to be the one to talk about what she's found and what there is. So, without further ado, take it away, Belle.
Okay, so as Arya stated, we're going to be talking about the Bronte sisters, the three Bronte sisters, Emily Bronte, who wrote Wuthering Heights, Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre, and Anne Bronte, who wrote The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Now, all of them did write other things. Those are just their most famous works for each of them. But what we're going to be talking about is what I have dubbed the Bronte Murder Theory.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know who actually came up with this theory.
Right.
However,
yeah, this is just one you found kind of...
Yes, however, true crime writer James Tolley wrote a book based on this theory.
Okay.
So, I'm going to just kind of refer to what he thinks because he's what I could find.
Okay.
And everything else was just not working.
Well, and it didn't probably seem very credible.
It didn't. None of it seemed very credible. The other stuff involved their brother, and I wasn't worried about it.
Right.
So he wrote a book called The Crimes of Charlotte Bronte.
Okay.
And his theory plays out that essentially Emily and Anne didn't die of tuberculosis as claimed, but Charlotte poisoned them.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm also not going to get much into the sisters' lives because
we'll probably talk about them much later on down the line.
Yes. But the sisters were close, and they all wrote books, and they all used male pen names to get their work published, but they all used the same last name.
Okay.
So, that just shows how close they were.
Right.
Okay. So, but Tully claims that trouble began when Arthur Bell Nicholas arrived at the parsonage of the Brontes.
Okay.
In 1845 to serve as an assistant to their father.
Okay.
Okay. Now, he believes that Nicholas is the villain of everything.
Okay.
That he seduced Charlotte and turned her against her siblings.
Okay.
Okay. So within the 4 years of his arrival, Emily, Anne, and their brother, Bronwell, were dead, and they died within 10 months of each other. None were older than 31. Now, I will mention that their brother was a drug addict and alcoholic.
Okay.
So I'm leaving him out because...
well, and he's not like
he's not the source of it. No.
He's not a writer either, so we leave him be.
Yeah. But, so I'm discrediting him. But Emily and Anne did die. Neither of them were 31. They were younger. Mm-hmm. Okay? Though it is claimed by historians that all of them did die of tuberculosis.
Okay.
But Tully says it was poisoning.
Okay.
So he says that Nicholas enlisted Charlotte's help to eliminate her siblings and then convinced her to marry him. And, well, they did wed because in 1854, they were wed against the wishes of her father.
Okay.
And then less than a year later, Charlotte died. And he claims that it wasn't a coincidence, that it was the final crime of Nicholas, and that she was also poisoned like her siblings, making him the sole heir to the sisters' fortune.
Okay, so I just want to try to get this timeline right. So essentially, this guy comes in, he meets everybody, and he starts kind of trying to get into Charlotte's head and trying to seduce her. The first two sisters, the other two sisters, which are Emily and Anne,
Yes.
they end up passing away relatively close together. And then after they pass away is when Charlotte marries the guy.
Yes.
And then a year after they're married, Charlotte passes away.
Less than a year, yes.
Less than a year.
Yes.
Leaving him the sole heir to everything.
Yes.
Okay. So what is there like evidence behind this, or like...
So, like, that's what I was kind of confused on, is because he mixes fact and fiction throughout his book. He references the sisters' letters, historical records, but the story is presented through the eyes of a maid of the family.
Okay.
So, like, it's really weird.
So this might be... this is quite possibly a fictional account then.
Yes. And it's also to be noted that in the first half of the 19th century, the average life expectancy in Haworth was 25.8.
Okay, so they lived a little bit older than their life expectancy then.
Yeah.
So most likely it is plausible that they did all die of tuberculosis.
Yes.
It's just, considering how this guy came on the scene, it seems kind of sketchy.
That's what he's claiming, but I honestly don't see, like, I don't think that this happened.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting theory.
It's an interesting theory, but, like, my whole thing was that Jane Eyre was a big seller, and that was her book.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of my thing. Like,
plus, she was like she was like one of the heads of the feminist movement in the Victorian era. So, like, no, it doesn't fit with everything she stood for, and
or at least with when it comes to her siblings.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. Like, I get that she married and, you know, whatever, whatever. But, like, when it comes to her siblings who also wrote, like, I'd be more, like, I'd kind of be like, okay, if Anne did it, sure. Right. Because Anne isn't
Anne is the least well-known of the
she's not as popular as Emily and Charlotte.
Right. Yeah.
Because when you think of Bronte, you think of Wuthering Heights.
And Jane Eyre.
You don't think of anything Anne wrote.
Yeah, and you don't really think of anything else that they wrote in general either. Like, those are the two that I think arguably are the most famous of their works.
Yes.
You know, I couldn't even, to be honest, I couldn't name anything else that they've done.
I can't either, and that's sad.
Well, I mean, but you're not a big fan of the Brontes.
No, because I hate Wuthering Heights, and I read Jane Eyre. I got mad at Jane Eyre, but I also read it going into... I read it early in my love for the classics.
Right.
So I got it, and I'm going to do a reread of it, but...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never, like I said at the beginning, I've never read any of the Brontes' works.
Don't read Wuthering Heights.
I mean, I have no interest, and they're not ones that I'm just kind of like, yes, I need to read those. Like, there are certain classics that I'm like, I really should read that. Like, that should be what I do. But there are other, like most classics, though, I'm just kind of like, meh, that's fine. I'm not going to read that. And so I just kind of let it go.
Yeah. But when it comes to, like, I also, like, don't agree with the fact that he, like, kind of states that she murdered her brother, too. Because her brother was an inspiration for a lot of the characters in both the girl in all the sister stories, most notably Heathcliff and Rochester, both Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre again. And, you know, they used him as inspiration. Like, no one would want to just kill off their inspiration.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you can, that doesn't track for me. And like, honestly, when it comes to him, when you said, you know, he is definitely someone who had struggled with different substances, you know, that doesn't surprise me that he passed away, just because, I mean, we of course don't know what he did, but
I know he did opium.
Yeah, and opium was definitely
It was very at the time.
Yeah, at the time it was kind of like the heroin of today. It was definitely something that was very easy to get to the point where you're overdosing on.
Yeah. And then I also found other things in researching it, and this is why in researching it I kind of just stuck with the one thing very quickly, because like in researching it I got to another thing where they blame him for the death of his sisters, claiming that through his drug abuse and alcohol abuse he got tuberculosis and then slept with Emily.
Oh, and that's
Gave her tuberculosis, which led to her death. And then because she was really close with Anne contracted it.
Yeah, I don't think that tracks. I mean, I don't know much about the Brontes, but like I feel like I haven't heard. Like I feel like if that was a real thing,
you would have heard more about it.
About it. Like there would definitely be whispers of scandal, like how we've covered a couple of different author talks. You know that you definitely heard the whispers of scandal.
Yes.
You know with that one, there's definitely not anything like that. So I feel like if that was real, there would be, and there's not. So I wouldn't give that part of the theory any credence. I would say that it would be, I mean, it definitely would be interesting, for lack of a better word. Like it would be, well, I guess fascinating is the better word, that, you know, Charlotte, who is probably with Emily in kind of the famous author territory.
Yeah. And
she just kind of, you know, was just like, nope, I don't, you know, I want to take all my sister's money, which to me, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Like I'd see it if it was Anne, because Anne was, you know.
Yeah. Anne was the least
famous
of the three. And so
she's still the least famous of the three.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it would make total sense that if she was the one, then I would say, okay, yeah, there's definitely some credence to this theory. But considering it's Charlotte, I wouldn't say that would be her.
If we're going on the vein of Anne, what you could say is that she was trying to poison both Charlotte and Emily to get her money, but only poisoned Emily. But in doing so, she accidentally poisoned herself when trying to poison Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that.
I mean, this is just me talking. There is no research to back up anything that just came out of my mouth.
Yeah, there is no credence to any of this. This is just us kind of vamping on the ideas that were presented. But, I mean, I wouldn't see that, though. Like, I feel like even though Anne's work is the least well-known of the three, that doesn't mean that she is not intelligent. Like, I think all three of the Bronte sisters were very intelligent women, and they were lucky enough to get, you know, somewhat of an education at the time, you know, at least enough of an education to be able to write. So, like, I don't know. I don't feel like that would track very well. Like, I really do think that if the order would have been like maybe Emily and then Charlotte and then Anne, I would say, okay, like maybe there's some credence there. But, you know, considering that it was who was first? Do you remember?
It didn't give me an order.
It didn't give you an order.
No.
Okay. So depending, regardless of who of the the first two, either Emily or Anne, it just, I don't know. There just isn't any, I don't feel like there's much credence to that.
No,
at all.
there isn't.
It's
There's no way. Like, for all I know, Anne died first, and all the stuff that came out of my mouth is nonsense. But
Right, exactly. And we're probably, like I said, going to do an author talk later down the line just on the three Bronte sisters.
yes,
So we'll be able to clear this up later on down the line.
it is important to note, though, that the family was kind of a sickly family because once Anne was born, a year after her being born, their mother died of cancer. And then I forget the timeline, but really not long after, in the grand scheme of things, their two older sisters died of tuberculosis.
Okay, so
Then it was Anne, Charlotte,
they were the youngest.
Emily,
or they were
and
like, yeah.
Bronwell, and their father.
Yeah, they were like kind of the youngest kids, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. It's interesting to talk about, but there definitely is I don't feel like there's no real evidence or no real credence to the whole thing. I mean, other than I feel like the timing is a bit suspect for Charlotte and the husband.
Yeah, like him poisoning her. Yes, that is a bit fishy. Like, I will say that. However, like 4 years to seduce someone into killing their family, like,
yeah, I mean, unless she was very reticent or hesitant in getting into a relationship, which, I mean, considering the Bronte sisters were kind of spinstery, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It wouldn't surprise me that she would be like, no, and then him be like, I mean, yeah, but again, I don't know that for sure. Like, that's just pure and total speculation. That is, take everything we say with a grain of salt. This is merely a theory that we're talking about.
exactly.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of the podcast. Is there any other final thoughts you want to add, Belle?
I think this theory is bullcrap. As much as I like the idea of a Bronte murder.
Yeah, it's interesting to speculate about, but at the same time, this is definitely there's no real evidence to support that. All right. Well, we want to thank you guys for coming along as we talked about this theory that there really isn't much to it, but we thought that it was interesting, especially since this is very close to spooky season. Of course, if you like the episode, if you like what you've been listening to, if you like us, please consider sharing the episode with your friends. We would really appreciate it. It really does help us to grow the show. And if you don't want to, hey, that's fine. You don't have to. But like I said, we appreciate any and all help we can get. And then what are we going to be talking about next time?
We're going to be doing a book-to-movie comparisons of Mr. Malcolm's List.
Oh, that is going to be very interesting. So we will see you guys next time.
Bye.